first going to start with Aabir Day, who's the director of Seed Change Canadian Field Program, which is the BOTA family initiative on Canadian seed security. Aabir developed his passion for seeds and an obsession for garlic. So Lisa, give him your garlic, while working at Everdale Farm, where he helped Seeds of Diversity Canada grow their great Canadian garlic collection. He completed a Master's of Environmental Studies at York University, researching organic seed systems in Ontario before joining Seed Change. Aabir has been instrumental in shaping and leading the initiative's training, research, and policy programs. Aabir is thrilled to be working with seed producers and farmers all over Canada to promote seed security coast to coast. And so I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to you, Aabir, and you can share your screen.
Okay. Great, thanks, Tia. Can everybody see that?
Yes, looks good.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Okay, yeah, well, really nice to be here. Thanks very much, Tia and COTA, for having me. So my name is Aabir, and I work for Seed Change, formerly known as USC Canada, and I'm the director of our Canadian Field Program, the BOTA Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security. Super excited to be on this panel today with Lisa and to talk to you all about one of my favorite things in the world, which is seeds, and specifically how participatory plant breeding in Canada can be a tool towards building seed sovereignty for farmers. So the theme of today's panel is seed sovereignty. And just before I kind of dig into my presentation, I want to share that the more I've been learning about seeds while doing the work of the initiative is that the conversation around seed sovereignty is always incomplete without fully understanding and acknowledging the contributions of Indigenous communities to seed systems and all of what has been lost and continues to be lost of Indigenous seed systems due to colonization. I won't be able to do justice to that history in this presentation, but while I have you, I'd like to draw your attention to a particular program that was launched this year by an Indigenous-led seed sovereignty initiative called Sovereign Seeds. And you'll see that there's a link to a fundraiser that's being held by Sovereign Seeds for an initiative called the COVID-19 Indigenous Seed Crisis Response Circle. The circle is a collective of Indigenous seed keepers growing out Indigenous seed varieties, increasing Indigenous seed supply, and redistributing the seed to Indigenous individuals and initiatives who need to access these seeds for food and seed saving. If you're able, making a contribution to this fundraiser is a really powerful way to support Indigenous seed sovereignty. And I want to be very clear that this isn't a fundraiser for Seed Change. Rather, it's a decolonially driven, Indigenous-led seed sovereignty initiative and something that we're supporting in an effort to build solidarity and food justice. And on that note, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to all of you from Guelph, Ontario, which is Treaty 3 territory. And it's currently home to many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and settlers, as well as the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe peoples, specifically the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Thank you so much for the space for letting me share that. And I'll get into a little bit about the work that we do. For those of you who did not see Martin Settle, one of our ADs, present earlier, Seed Change is one of Canada's longest standing nonprofit organizations. Over the course of 75 years, we've been working with farmers and partners all over the world to build food sovereignty through enhancing biodiversity, spreading ecological food systems, and countering inequity. In 2013, we started the BOTA initiative as our first Canadian field program. And the goal of this initiative is to build seed systems in Canada that promote food security and are resilient in the face of climate change. It's a national program that works with farmers, seed growers, and research institutions all over the country. And the goal is to increase the quantity, quality, and diversity of organic and ecological seed that's adapted to regional farming conditions. We run a range of different programs and work with a host of different farm organizations across the country to support on-farm research and training on seed conservation, seed production, and plant breeding. Some of that work focuses on maintaining agriculturally significant seed diversity that's important for Canadian gardeners and farmers. And some of it is focused on improving that seed diversity or the seed diversity that's imported here so that it's adapted to Canadian organic climate conditions. The part that I'd like to talk about today and what folds neatly into our discussions on seed sovereignty are our efforts to create new seed diversity through the implementation of participatory plant breeding programs, which I'll also refer to as PPB. Now, it would be like a really tall order to list all of the incredibly innovative farmers and researchers that have pioneered PPB. There are leaders for this work, both from our international programs in Honduras, Nepal, Mali, and others outside of those contexts in Europe and the US. And all of these practitioners and farmers have inspired us to do the work that's happening here in Canada. So in Canada, we support two PPB programs. One is a project that's focused on developing new varieties of wheat, oats, and potatoes that's been around since 2013. And that's led by Dr. Martin Entz, who is the recipient of COTA's 2019 Leadership in Organic Science Award, and his incredible team at the University of Manitoba. And the other is a vegetable breeding program and variety trialing program called CANOVI. It stands for the Canadian Organic Vegetable Improvement Project, which is a partnership with Dr. Hannah Whitman at the University of British Columbia and a range of public plant breeders at land-grant universities in the US. Both of these projects are funded by the Organic Science Cluster Funding Program, a program at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So hopefully that gives a bit of context in terms of some of the key actors involved in our PPB work. What I'm going to try to focus on now is how PPB programs run and why they're critical in giving us more tools to help to mitigate and adapt to climate change, while also being essential for building food and seed sovereignty for organic farmers. And before kind of talking about how our PPB program runs, it's probably helpful just to do like a quick overview of what a plant breeding program entails. So the purpose of any plant breeding program is to develop a new variety. And in most breeding programs, the steps to create and release a variety are all the same. You have to have some breeding goals in mind so you know what kind of variety to develop, and understanding of what varieties you'd like to use as parental lines to create genetic variation. And then you have to take that genetic material through the different stages of selection before it can be used on a farm. Now, historically speaking, all these activities would always be done by the farmer. For farmers in the audience, I'm probably not saying anything new, but there was no differentiation between farmers and plant breeders. However, in Canada and many places all over the world, that's like no longer the case. And you can see that the majority of commercial variety development actually happens off-farm without the input of farmers. Now, this gets particularly problematic when you're seeking varieties that are developed for organic farming conditions and varieties that are adapted to regional farming conditions. Organic crops face challenges from weeds, pests, and diseases in increasingly complex ways, and they face different selection pressures than conventionally bred crops. And virtually all of the varieties that are released and available for commercial farmers in Canada have all been bred under conventional farming conditions. And this doesn't mean that they're bad varieties. In fact, Canada's public plant breeding programs for cereals is among the best in the world. It just means that we're not developing varieties that are selected to thrive in organic farming conditions. And when we start to think about creating varieties that are adapting to changing climatic conditions, the concept of regional variety development is really important. For example, virtually all of the vegetable seed that's planted in Canada and grown by Canadian vegetable farmers, that's all been bred elsewhere, and all of the seed for that has been grown elsewhere. And it means that none of those varieties are really bred or adapted to Canadian farming climates, in particular marginal farming climates in Canadian conditions. So there's a growing body of academic research that indicates varieties that are bred for organic conditions will perform better will perform better when grown in those conditions. And there's a equally growing body of evidence that shows that when farmers can apply their own selection criteria to develop those varieties, it can be a more effective approach at developing varieties that work on their farm. So what you can kind of see that there's a spectrum of what variety development looks like, from farmer-led to researcher-led. And for our program, we aspire to sort of be a complete participatory plant breeding program. For practical reasons, the actual creation of genetic material and the subsequent kind of increases of seed, in particular for cereals, happens by plant breeders, researchers, since they have specialized skills, equipment, and facilities to do that more efficiently than on farm. But the more crucial parts, that's like the selection of the parental material and the selection of new variety traits themselves, happen on farmers' fields by farmers. So, kind of understanding a brief snapshot of what PPP looks like, I'd like to run through a few examples of how it's playing out in Canada. This is Loic Deswavrin, a phenomenal organic farmer in Quebec, who wanted a high-yielding wheat that performed well as a whole wheat and white flour with bakers that he sold to, but also was vigorous and competitive with weeds on his farm so that he could reduce the amount of cultivation needed for weed management earlier in the season. And he was also very keen on developing a variety that worked for his farm and his markets. This is Carl Mccorrister. He's an Indigenous farmer who runs the Peguis Agricultural Project in Peguis, Manitoba, and he's involved in our potato breeding program and is working on developing a new variety of Peguis potato. And this group of women farmers in southwestern Ontario are breeding a new variety of bell pepper that ripens earlier in their climates. One of the central goals for this pepper, in addition to earliness, is flavor. And these growers have been working with chefs and customers to evaluate the flavor of the bell pepper variety that they're working on as well. So in Canada, we're now working with over 100 farmers across the country to help develop new varieties of wheat, oats, potatoes, peppers, carrots, and winter squash. And we're hoping for that list of crops and that number of farmers to only grow, and the number of breeding partnerships that come out of this to grow. For the field crop breeding program with the University of Manitoba, some of the results that we are seeing, especially in the early organic wheat trials, is that they're demonstrating that some of the farmer-selected populations are performing really well when tested in organic crop production environments. Granted, this is early data, but it's not insignificant, and it's demonstrating to us that farmer-led plant breeding in organic farming has a lot of potential. Now, the other really beautiful element of PPB and kind of what I get most excited about is that farmers are learning, or rather relearning, how to be plant breeders. This is a capacity building program as much as it is a variety development program, and finished varieties are not and kind of should not be the only indicator for success. So even if varieties developed through this program are not released commercially, farmers are still creating regionally developed germplasm that can be used for future breeding efforts. And working to democratize this model of plant breeding in Canada has a lot of merit towards building a seed sovereign system for organic farmers. So, what are the impacts for this on seed sovereignty? When I talk about the PPB program, I get really excited, but I have to remember to stop myself because it's a very ahistorical way of looking at our seed systems. Indigenous communities, food providers, farmers, and seed savers, there's a long history of who the original plant breeders are for our food system. And that's not to discredit all of the progress that's happened and has been achieved through modern plant breeding. And again, in Canada in particular, our public plant breeding programs for cereals, but to recognize that it's come at the cost of separating farmers from the process of variety development, and that has implications on seed sovereignty. One of the guiding policies that inform our work is the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. And the objectives of this treaty are to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of all plant genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from their use. Canada is a contracting party to this treaty, and I just want to highlight two articles from this treaty that I think are really important for us to know about. The first one is Article 6.2, which talks about the sustainable use of resources and specifically outlines ways in which we can support participatory research and variety development to strengthen the capacity of farmers to conserve seed on their own farms and develop varieties that work for sustainable agriculture. The second one is Article 9, and this talks about farmers' rights and the needs for us to recognize the historical contributions in creating crop diversity that we work with today, and to ensure that we have policies that uphold farmers' rights to save, use, and exchange farm-safe seed. PPB programs which center the needs of farmers, like the ones that we're trying to support, create greater opportunities for us to meet these aspirational public policy commitments. And we need to ensure that our seed policies, like the ones Lisa will be speaking to after me, can help us facilitate us to achieve these too. I read a quote a long time ago that I kind of always come back to whenever I think about seed sovereignty, and try to figure out like a solution that works given all the myriad of interests that are in agriculture. And it asks a question of what do farmers want with respect to seeds. And I'll just read the quote. Clearly different farmers want different things, but it seems reasonable to suggest that most want recognition of their contributions, fair rewards for their labor, the freedom to farm as they please, good seeds that produce good crops, but that do not ruin their land or lead to lost autonomy, and supportive communities that exercise control over the food they consume. This is not a radical way to look at our food and seed system, but it's also not the one that we currently have. And when I look at the work of the variety improvement and development programs of the farmers that we work with, I see something closer to this version of things. And I also see where things need to get much better. I think I'll close on a note just by saying that there's a lot of deep things to think about when it comes to seed sovereignty, and Lisa's going to be touching on some of those things that we need to be thinking about right now. But I want to also emphasize that at the end of the day, for most farmers involved in our work, seed saving and plant breeding is incredibly joyful work. For a farmer who's developing a new variety, it's really fun to see all of this diversity and to be able to create a new crop that's adapted to your farm, that's adapted to healthy, ecologically restorative farming practices, and ones that you can share with freedom with your community. That's what food and seed sovereignty looks like for a lot of the growers we work with. And ultimately, that's the kind of seed system we'd like to help build. These are the partners that we work with for some of our projects and some of the funders that support our work. And if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to me and visit our website. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Aabir. That was great. Okay, Lisa, if you want to share your screen and I'll do your introduction. So Lisa Mumm, well, I'm very pleased to have her presenting. She was on our COTA board for many, many years, so of course I miss her. And she is the director of Organic Connections, which is the organic conference that happens every 2 years in Saskatchewan. And she also holds the seat for COTA on the Plant Breeders' Rights Council. She was raised on her family's organic seed and sheep farm and is a fourth-generation farmer in Saskatchewan. Together with her mother, Maggie, she runs the family farm and the business, Mumm's Sprouting Seeds. Lisa works actively to strengthen the food system in Canada. She has worked with the Canadian Biotechnology Action Network, otherwise known as CBAN, in its efforts to stop GM's alfalfa and is a member of the Organic Agriculture Protection Fund Committee of Sask Organics. She represents COTA on the Seed Regulation Modernization Working Group on the CFIA's Plant Breeders' Rights Advisory Committee. She has served on the Organic Connections Board since 2012 and spent 7 years on our COTA's Board of Directors. Lisa also works to empower women entrepreneurs in the food sector through her roles on the Saskatchewan Food Centre's Advancing Women Entrepreneurs through skill development, opportunity identification, manufacturing support, and export marketing on their advisory committee. And she's also on the Small Scale Food Processor Association Status of Women Steering Committee. So definitely a star-studded speaker. So Lisa, I'd love to turn it over to you if you want to just make sure that your video is on. Just wait to see if I can see you before I hand it over.
You see me?
Yes, now we can see you. Great. Okay, thanks.
Good. All right, well, thanks so much to COTA for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this topic. And many thanks to Aabir for providing that really good overview of the important breeding work that's happening right now. Just as a side note, we participated in the PPB wheat program on our farm, and I did find the process both very empowering and also very fun. You were right, that it is a fun process for farmers. So really, seeds are the foundation of farming, and they are the cornerstone of our organic food system. And as an organic farmer, I feel that I rely on seed adapted to our farm conditions and climate probably even more than other farmers might, because we're not relying on synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. Seeds are one of our most important tools on our farm to meet the challenges of pests, disease, and plant nutrition. So organic farmers need access to varieties that are well suited both to organic production, but also to their local ecosystem. And our challenge right now is to develop an organic seed system in Canada that will give farmers access to the varieties that they need. A few key initiatives are taking place right now that could have long-lasting consequences for organic farmers across the country. But I'm confident that if we work together to ensure that the voices of both organic farmers and the organic community are heard in this process, then we'll be able to build a stronger seed system for the benefit of farmers and the entire sector. Oops. So what's happening right now in the Canadian seed sector? One of the greatest challenges that we face in developing our organic seed sector is the unprecedented concentration of global seed companies. Small seed companies are being bought up by multinational agrochemical companies. And for them, seeds are really just one component of their sales package of agricultural and chemical inputs. Right now, 5 companies control about 56% of the global seed market and 73% of the global pesticide market. And that poses a very real threat to organics in Canada. Tied to this corporatization of the seed industry in Canada, we've seen the emergence of the seed synergy lobby. It is the Seed Synergy Lobby is led by the main players in the corporate seed world. So the Canadian Seed Trade Association, the Commercial Seed Analysts Association of Canada, CropLife Canada, the Canadian Seed Growers Association, and the Canadian Seed Institute. And they released a white paper in 2018 that essentially was looking for further consolidation and self-governance for the industrial seed sector. So I just pulled a few pieces out of their white paper. And they're asking for things like a tiered risk-based system for food safety evaluation and approval of new plants with novel traits. So in other words, they're looking to fast track new patented GMO crop approvals. They're looking for a unified industry managed and government enabled integrated product registry, providing comprehensive product profiles for the majority of commercial seed. So in other words, there is a push to water down the current variety registration or get rid of it altogether. And our variety registration ensures that new varieties meet quality, disease, and agronomic standards. They also talk about a unified industry managed and government enabled seed certification function, which is looking to get rid of our public quality control system that requires new seed varieties to be supported by evidence from multi-year performance data. And finally, there has been a movement to create one group that would act on behalf of the entire Canadian seed system. So in August, there was a vote among the memberships of these organizations to create an amalgamated industry group called Seeds Canada. The membership of the Canadian Seed Growers Association actually voted against the amalgamation, but the remaining groups plan to hold another vote with the goal of bringing Seeds Canada into existence by February 2021. So this consolidation is worrisome for the development of an organic seed system, but it's not just organic farmers that are concerned with this trend. Conventional farmers have seen firsthand the impact of the corporatization of the seed system with canola, and the conventional producers I speak with are really, really concerned about this issue too. So I want to just touch briefly on value creation. I'm sure that many of you are aware of the stakeholder consultations that took place in late 2018, early 2019 on 2 proposed models for value creation in cereals. Both models, I'm not going to go into them in detail, but both models would attempt to capture royalties from farm-saved seed. What we heard during the consultations is that while the organic industry supports innovation in breeding, most were really, really concerned about value creation for a number of reasons, including, importantly, the fact that saving seed is a really, really vital practice for organic producers. When a variety isn't commercially available as organic seed, we can use derogation to plant untreated GMO seed. And then we need to have the ability to save that seed and plant organic seed the next year. And release, as Aabir mentioned, seed saving is empowerment for farmers. And also there's likely some microclimate adaptation to the specific farm and soil as populations are saved over several years. Secondly, iFoam's position doesn't jive well with the proposed value creation models, because although iFoam acknowledges variety protection, they do so only if farmers' privilege or farmers' right to save seed is guaranteed. And lastly, these models weren't supported by the organic sector because it was felt that the royalties paid by organic producers could flow back into breeding programs using techniques like gene editing that are prohibited in organics. And in COTA's 2018, oh no, sorry, maybe it's older than that, 2015 report, The Market for Organic and Ecological Seed in Canada, COTA listed one of the major challenges to achieving organic seed security being lack of large breeder investment in genetic advancements for organic varieties in Canada. So royalties paid by organic growers are usually invested in non-organic plant breeding, and often even varieties developed using GE techniques that we can't use. So just briefly here, in October 2019, about a year ago, the Alberta Federation of Agriculture, APAS in Saskatchewan, the Keystone Agricultural Producers of Manitoba released the results of a big survey. I think they had over 1,000 respondents, and the majority disagreed that value creation models should be pursued. And so given the feedback that they got during all of the consultations and the feedback from that survey, the PBR office recognized that they didn't have a mandate to move forward with value creation. So they've temporarily shelved the proposal, and they didn't move forward with stage 2 of the online consultations. But what we did hear loud and clear during the value creation consultations is that there is an extremely high level of support from both organic and conventional producers for public breeding programs. So now is the time for us to really speak up and support public breeding programs, farmer-led breeding, and organic breeding programs. A second initiative that's happening right now is the seed regulatory modernization. Both Aabir and I sit on this working group, and the aim is to collect stakeholder feedback on the current seed regulatory system to find out what's working well and what might need to be updated. But there's pressure from the Seed Synergy Group for a major overhaul of the seed system for the benefit of the agrochemical industry. So right now, the working group is finalizing a needs assessment survey for distribution in early 2021. And it will be really critical that this survey is distributed widely among all of our networks to ensure that the needs of organic producers are heard in this process. And also task teams are being formed on quite a few topics. So I've listed them. This is just a draft list, but topics might include, or probably will include, variety registration, grade tables and seed standards, certification, common seed, heritage varieties. So it will be really important to have perspectives from the organic sector at all of these discussions. So if you're interested in participating in a working group, or if you'd like to recommend someone, please let Aabir or I know. And a couple of key issues in terms of seed regulatory modernization that jump out to me that will be important for our sector are include varietal information. So organic and low input producers would really benefit from recommendations for criteria or quality parameters to the variety registration recommending committees, because we're often overlooked in this process. And in the EU, there's quite a bit of information around performance in both conventional and organic production systems on new varieties. So producers can have a really clear indication ahead of seeding whether a variety is going to perform well in an organic system. And it would be really useful to have information like this available to organic producers. Secondly, variety cancellation. So since the Seeds Act will be up for review, we will have an opportunity to ask for some amendments around variety registration. the cancellation of useful varieties has been very problematic for many organic farmers. And unless there's market harm, maybe varieties shouldn't be canceled, or at least there should be a really thorough public consultation. And this could be an important issue to our sector. So I recommend that we make our voices heard. And I know I'm running out of time here, but I just also quickly want to speak briefly on derogation. So as we know, the ability to request derogation and use conventional untreated seed is really important so that organic farmers have access to the varieties they need in sufficient quantity and quality. And this has allowed our sector to grow. But at the same time, it also has meant that seed companies don't necessarily have the incentive to ramp up organic seed production. And COTA's Market for Organic and Ecological Seed in Canada's report highlighted how problematic some of the divergent interpretations of the derogation rules are in Canada. And inspectors that they interviewed suggested that there's like a huge variance in how hard farmers look for organic seeds when they're making their seed purchases. But in the US, certain certifiers are requesting that farmers improve their sourcing of organic seed every year. So they're looking for continuous improvement. And the Organic Seed Alliance has found that when certifiers request improvement in sourcing more organic seed, farmers respond by using more organic seed. And in conversations I've had with certifiers that are doing this in the US, they're also finding that seed companies are responding because they're getting a lot more calls because of this demand for continuous improvement. So they're aware of the demand more than they might otherwise be. And in the EU, right now, typically it varies between country and crop type, but the use of organic seed typically is mandatory unless derogation is permitted on that specific crop type. But with their new organic regulations, derogations will actually be phased out by the end of 2035. So we can't ignore the direction in which our trading partners are moving and the massive efforts taking place both in the US and the EU to develop robust organic seed systems. So right now we have an opportunity to create an organic seed system that's really distinct from the dominant seed system. And to do that, we need to build relationships with regional plant breeders. We need to support the work that's being done around PPB in Canada. We need to develop really robust mechanisms for increased funding for organic seed development. We need to support the reemergence of small seed companies. We need to support the next generation of plant breeders. We need to support the scaling up of organic seed production to provide quality seed of the varieties that farmers need. We need to advocate for organic seed by working with certifiers to ensure a consistent application of the derogation option. So the time has come for us to prioritize the development of a robust organic seed system in Canada. And I thank you for your time. And I think Aabir and I will be able to answer questions for about the next 15 minutes or so.